You clicked because you saw that strange little pistol with a knife folded under it, and you thought there's no way a cowboy carried something that ugly. I'm here to tell you he did. And it was far from the strangest thing riding in a saddlebag on the old trails. Here's what I learned the hard way. Most of what we think we know about how the men of the West armed themselves is Hollywood nonsense. The real weapons were sneakier, cheaper, and a whole lot cleverer than the shiny six-shooter on the movie poster. The frontier didn't reward the flashy man. It rewarded the man who survived, and survival made folks inventive in ways that still work today. I'm going to walk you through 25 of these forgotten tools, and I'm going to hold one back for the end. It comes straight out of a trail hand's account near the Chisholm Trail in 1871, and it's a trick you can set up in your own kitchen this weekend with things already in your house. No ranch required, no gun required either. Just the same thinking that kept those men alive. I remember standing in my granddad's barn when I was maybe 9 years old, staring at a rusted metal thing hanging on a nail, shaped like nothing I'd ever seen. He told me it was a weapon. I laughed at him. He didn't laugh back. And it took me almost 50 years to understand that old man knew more than every gun magazine I ever bought. Because here's the truth I resisted for most of my life. I spent decades buying the modern, expensive, convenient version of everything, the tactical this, the polymer that, and slowly, piece by piece, I came back around to what the old hands swore by. Not because it was charming, because it worked better. Let me show you. Let's start with that ugly little thing that made you click, because it's real and its story is stranger than you'd guess. They called it the Apache pistol, though it had nothing to do with the Apache people. It was a folding contraption that was a revolver, a set of brass knuckles, and a short blade all welded into one fist-sized lump of iron. A man could punch you, stab you, or shoot you without ever changing his grip. It came out of the back alleys of Europe in the 1860s and rode west in the coat pockets of gamblers and drifters who couldn't afford to lose a close fight. Now, I always figured that was a gimmick, a novelty, something for a museum case and nothing more. But think about what a fella actually faced back then. Most killing on the frontier didn't happen at 50 paces in a dusty street at high noon. That's the movies. It happened up close, in a saloon, in the dark, in the space of a card table, where a real 6-gun was too slow to clear leather. The men who understood that carried something that worked at arm's length, and the ones who carried a big, beautiful pistol they couldn't draw in time are the ones who didn't make it into anybody's story. That's the first lesson, and it runs through everything I'm about to tell you. The West rewarded the practical over the pretty. Remember that, because it's about to change how you see the next 24 things on this list. But if you think that little 3-in-1 fist gun was the sneakiest thing a cowboy carried, wait until you hear what they hid in plain sight, because the next one was designed to look like it wasn't a weapon at all. Let me tell you about the pepperbox and about the gambler's friend they called the derringer, because these two changed how I think about the whole idea of being armed. The pepperbox came first, back in the 1830s and 40s, and it was a fat little pistol with a whole cluster of barrels bundled together like a nest of pipes. You didn't aim it so much as point it at a man close enough to smell his breath. It was clumsy. It was inaccurate past about 10 feet, and frontier folks bought them by the wagon load anyway. Why? Because I had it backwards my whole life, and maybe you do too. I assumed a weapon's job was to be powerful. It isn't. A weapon's job is to make the other man decide it isn't worth it. And a fat cluster of barrels shoved across a card table did that beautifully. Nobody wanted to gamble their life on which of those barrels was loaded. Then came the derringer, and this is the one that really got to me. Small enough to vanish in a vest pocket or a lady's handbag or the top of a boot, it only held 1 or 2 shots. 1 or 2. I used to scoff at that. What good is 1 shot? But the men who carried them understood something I didn't. The derringer was never meant to win a battle. It was meant to end a problem that had already gotten too close. In the half-second when the big iron on your hip was useless, it was insurance worn against the skin. Here's the historical fact most folks never hear. The very design that killed a president, the little single-shot pocket pistol used in 1865, was the same humble tool that thousands of ordinary travelers, storekeepers, and yes, working cowhands tucked away every single day for decades. The frontier ran on hidden, quiet, small, not loud and shiny. And that principle, hidden and small and always within reach, is the exact reason the next weapon on my list is one you've walked right past 100 times without ever knowing it could save your life. I want to talk about the things that weren't even supposed to be weapons, because this is where the Old West gets truly clever, and this is where I started to feel a little foolish about all the money I've spent over the years. Take the common cattle whip, the quirt, the short braided leather crop every rider carried to move stock. In a tight spot, that same braided leather with a weighted end became a vicious close-range tool. A crack across a man's face or a hand could end a confrontation before it started, and nobody could ever say you were carrying a weapon. You were carrying tack. You were doing your job. Then there's the slungshot. Not a slingshot like a boy's toy. A slungshot, a heavy weight tied to the end of a short cord or a length of braided rope. Sailors made them, and they traveled inland with everybody who'd ever worked a dock or a riverboat. A cowhand could make 1 in 5 minutes from a rock, a strip of leather, and a bit of his own lariat. It cost nothing, it weighed nothing on your belt, and swung hard it could drop a man twice your size. I used to think you needed to buy protection. These men manufactured it from the dirt around their boots and the rope itself. The lariat, the riata, 40 feet of braided rawhide that every single one of these men could throw with more accuracy than most folks today can throw a baseball. That rope pulled men off horses. It bound them in the hands of somebody who'd roped 10,000 calves. It was a genuine weapon of control, and it was hanging off every saddle from Texas to Montana. Nobody thought twice about it. That was the genius. The most dangerous tools were the ones that looked like everyday work. Now this is the part where I know exactly what some of you are thinking, because I thought it too. You're thinking, that's fine for a man on a horse with cattle and open range, but I live in a house on a normal street or an apartment or a little place in town, and none of this touches my life. Stay right here with me, because the next few minutes are built specifically for you, and they're the reason I made this whole video. Here is the thing those old cowhands understood that translates perfectly to your ordinary home today, and it has nothing to do with owning a firearm. Their real weapon was never the object. It was the habit of looking at ordinary things and seeing what they could become. That habit costs nothing. and it works in a suburban kitchen just as well as it worked on the goodnight-loving trail. Look around whatever room you're sitting in right now. A cowhand from 1880 would see a dozen tools of defense that you see as furniture. That heavy flashlight by your bed, the one most folks own, is a modern slungshot, weight and reach in one honest object nobody can question. A sturdy walking cane by your door is the same self-defense tool that respectable gentlemen carried openly for 100 years, and no one can ever say a word about a man with a cane. A simple metal fire poker, an ordinary pool cue, the heavy end of a broom, a fistful of keys, a can of wasp spray in the garage that shoots 20 feet. These are the modern derringers and quirts. Not powerful, just enough, and always within reach. The old hands had a rule I've come to live by, and I want you to take it with you today. Keep something at hand in every room you spend time in, and let it be something ordinary. That's it. That's the whole secret the frontier ran on. Not an arsenal, a mindset. The wealthy tenderfoot who came west with a fancy engraved pistol and no idea how to use anything else was in far more danger than the poor cowhand who could turn his own belt, his own rope, and his own booth heel into 3 separate ways to go home alive. I fought this idea for years because I'd been sold the opposite my whole life. Buy the product, buy the upgrade, buy the subscription to feel safe. And these men with almost nothing in their pockets were safer in a lawless country than a lot of folks feel in a locked house today. That stung when I finally understood it. But it also set me free, and it can do the same for you before this weekend is out. So, if a rope and a rock and a length of leather did the job, you might be asking why anybody bothered with the big famous guns at all, and the answer pulls us straight into the next forgotten weapon, one that could do the work of 2 guns at once. Let me tell you about the LeMat, because when I first read the specifications, I honestly thought somebody was pulling my leg. Picture a revolver. Now picture that its cylinder holds 9 shots instead of the usual 5 or 6. That alone would make it a monster. But the man who designed it, a New Orleans doctor named Jean-Alexandre LeMat, wasn't finished. He built a second barrel, a short shotgun barrel running right down the center of that cylinder. Flip a little lever on the hammer and your revolver became a single blast shotgun, 9 pistol rounds and a load of buckshot, all in one gun you held in one hand. They made these in the late 1850s and through the war years of the 1860s. Cavalry officers prized them. A man could empty 9 shots into a charging fight and still have that shotgun blast held in reserve for the last desperate second. I spent good money over the years chasing the idea of one gun that could do everything, and here a fellow had solved that riddle before the Transcontinental Railroad was even finished. We didn't invent the do-it-all tool. We forgot it and reinvented a worse version. But here's what the LeMat teaches, and it's bigger than the gun itself. The frontier was an age of relentless invention, of men refusing to accept the limits of what they'd been handed. And that refusal, that stubborn tinkering genius, is exactly what got buried as the country got tamed and the big factories decided what you were allowed to buy. And if you want to go deeper into that thinking, the practical over the pretty, the habit over the gadget, I've put the whole system into a book called Frontier Habits, where I lay out the exact methods and mindsets the old hands lived by, adapted for anyone living today. It's the same material I spent decades tracking down through first-hand accounts, barn finds, and trail journals, and it's available through the link in the description if you want to take it home with you. There's also a companion volume called Deep Trail that goes further into the specific tools and fieldcraft, and the full system if you want everything in one place. Keep that in mind as we go, because what's coming next is going to make a lot more sense once you see the pattern behind it. Because somewhere along the way, and this is where my blood starts to warm up a little, the astonishing variety of what a free man could carry got narrowed down, cheapened, and sold back to us as a handful of approved choices. The men who profited didn't want a nation of tinkerers who could arm themselves from a scrap heap. They wanted customers. And the fastest way to make a customer is to make him forget he was ever capable of doing it himself. Hold on to that thought, because the next weapon shows you exactly how much capability we lost, and it was so simple a child could build one. I need to tell you about the harmonica pistol and the duckfoot, because these are the ones that made me sit back in my chair. The harmonica gun had a straight metal bar drilled with several chambers that slid across the firing mechanism one at a time, like sliding a harmonica across your lips, hence the name. The duckfoot pistol had multiple barrels splayed out in a fan, like the foot of a duck, so that a single pull sent shots spraying in several directions at once. A ship's captain or a prison guard facing a crowd could hold off a whole mob with one trigger pull. Now these look ridiculous to modern eyes. They looked ridiculous to me. But every one of them was answering a real specific problem that a real man faced with the materials and machining he had on hand. That's not primitive. That's the opposite of primitive. That's a culture where solving your own problem was normal, where you didn't wait for a company to release the right product. You looked at your need and you built the answer. Compare that to now. We've been trained to believe that safety and capability are things you purchase, boxed and warrantied, and that trying to provide for yourself is quaint or even dangerous. That training didn't happen by accident. Every dollar you spend depending on somebody else is a dollar that keeps flowing, month after month, year after year. The old cowhand who could arm himself from a rock and a rope was a terrible customer. He owed nobody anything. And a man who owes nobody anything is exactly the kind of man that a certain kind of business would rather you forget ever existed. That's the villain in this story, and it isn't a person in a black hat. It's the slow, quiet trading away of your own capability for the false comfort of always buying the answer. The frontier is proof it wasn't always this way, and proof it doesn't have to stay this way. And nothing proves that better than the weapon I'll show you next, because it turned the cheapest, most ordinary object on the entire frontier into something a man's life depended on. Let me tell you about the coach gun and the humble scatter gun, and why the shotgun was the true king of the West, no matter what the movies told you about the revolver. The coach gun was a short, double-barreled shotgun cut down so a man could swing it fast inside the tight quarters of a stagecoach. That's where we get the phrase riding shotgun. The man up beside the driver, guarding the strongbox, held one of these across his knees. When the famous stage lines and express companies of the 1870s needed to protect gold and payroll, they didn't reach for a fancy pistol. They reached for 2 barrels of buckshot because up close, nothing on earth was more convincing. Here's what I love about it. A shotgun didn't demand you be a great marksman. A nervous storekeeper, a tired old rancher, a woman alone on a homestead, none of them needed to be a gunfighter. Point the two barrels in the right direction and the fight was usually over before it started. It democratized safety. It put a frightened, untrained, ordinary person on nearly even footing with a hardened outlaw. That's a powerful thing, and it's why the shotgun outlived nearly every fancy pistol on this list in the hands of everyday working folks. The Sharps rifle deserves a word too. The buffalo gun, the one that could reach out and drop a beast the size of a small car at distances that seem impossible. Buffalo hunters in the 1870s used these to take animals at ranges past a quarter mile. That same reach protected a homestead's approaches long before anyone dreamed of what we'd have today. But the Sharps was expensive and specialized, and that's precisely why the shotgun mattered more to the common man. Cheap, forgiving, and deadly. The people's weapon. Now I've walked you through revolvers with shotgun barrels and fist guns and pepper boxes and fan-shaped hand cannons and coach guns and buffalo rifles. That's a good long way into these 25, but every one of them so far has been an object you'd have to find or buy or build, and I promised you at the very start something different, something that needs no gun at all, that comes straight out of a trail hand's own words from 1871 and that you can set up tonight. So let me clear the trail and take you there, because this is the one I really brought you here for. For years I assumed the smartest thing the old cowhands carried was a weapon in their hand. I was wrong. The smartest thing they carried was in their head, and it was the art of never being caught unprepared in the first place. Let me tell you where I found this, because it matters. It comes from the recorded recollections of trail hands who worked the great cattle drives up out of Texas in the early 1870s, the Chisholm Trail years, when a crew of men and thousands of longhorns crossed hundreds of miles of open, dangerous country with everything they owned rolled up behind their saddles. Here was their problem. At night, in camp, a man is at his most helpless. He's asleep on the ground. His gun belt is off. Rustlers, thieves, and worse knew that the dark hours were when a camp was soft. So the old hands developed a system, and it's so simple that when I finally understood it, I felt foolish for every expensive gadget I ever bought to feel secure. They turned the camp itself into an alarm and a weapon. First, the trick most folks have heard a piece of. They laid a horsehair rope, a lariat woven from horsehair, in a circle on the ground around a sleeping man. The old belief was that a rattlesnake wouldn't cross the prickly horsehair, but here's the part that got buried. The rope's real job was bigger than snakes. That circle marked a boundary a man knew by heart in the dark, so that any hand or hoof that crossed it in the night meant something was wrong, and he woke already knowing where the threat stood. Second, and here's the piece I want you to actually use. They arranged their gear, their tin cups, their pots, their spurs, anything that rattled, in deliberate spots around the camp and along the likely approaches. Not scattered carelessly, placed. A man moving in on that camp in the dark could not avoid setting off a clatter of tin and metal, and every sleeping hand came awake at the sound, oriented, ready, before the intruder ever reached them. They built a web of noise. The frontier's alarm system, made of nothing but the dishes they already owned. Now here is why I'm telling you this, and how it lands in your ordinary home tonight, whether you're on 100 acres or on the third floor of an apartment building in the middle of a city. The single greatest weapon those men had was not being surprised, and you can build the exact same thing they built this weekend for free with what's already in your house. Do this. Take a look at the 1 or 2 ways a person would actually have to come into your home in the dark, the back door, the hallway, the top of the stairs, and place something there that cannot be moved quietly. A few empty cans stacked so they'll tumble, a little pile of anything that rattles set where a foot would find it, a creaky board you stop bothering to fix and start thinking of as a friend, a wind chime hung on the inside of a door. It sounds almost too simple to matter. That's exactly what I thought. But a threat you hear coming is a threat you've already half beaten, and a threat that reaches you while you sleep is the one that wins. Those trail hands knew that surprise was the real killer, and darkness and silence were the outlaw's only true advantages. Take away the silence, and you've taken away the fight before it starts. That is the secret the whole armed frontier actually rested on. Not the LeMat, not the sharps, not the fancy engraved 6-gun. It was awareness, built into the ground around you with ordinary objects, so that you were never, ever caught asleep and helpless. Every weapon on this list was a backup to that one idea. The old hands would rather never draw a gun at all, because a fight avoided is a fight you can't lose. And they engineered their whole world so the fight came to them on their terms, awake and ready, or didn't come at all. I keep a version of it by my own back door to this day. Cost me nothing, and I sleep better than I did in all the years I trusted a keypad and a monthly bill to watch over me. That's the thing they took from us without us ever noticing. Not a gun. A way of seeing the world where you were the one responsible for your own safety, capable of it, and beholden to no company, no subscription, and no monthly payment to feel secure in your own home. Those cowhands owned their safety outright. It was built into their habits and their hands, and nobody could shut it off or charge them again next month. If you've felt that pull while I've been talking, that quiet sense that we traded something real for something convenient, then you already know what kind of person you are. You're the kind who'd rather trust a method that's proven itself for 150 years than a shiny promise that wants your money every 30 days. You're the kind who looks at an old rusted tool on a barn nail and wonders what that old man knew. Same as I finally did. So let me ask you something straight, and I want you to answer me down in the comments, because this audience never speaks up unless I ask you plain, and I'm asking. Out of everything I laid out today, which one surprised you most? The fist gun that shot and stabbed and punched? The revolver with a shotgun barrel down its middle? Or the camp full of rattling tin cups that beat every outlaw before he ever arrived? Tell me. And tell me where in the world you're watching from tonight. A ranch, a small town, a big city, a quiet apartment. I want to know who's out there riding along with me. Leave it in a comment right now, because I read them, and the folks who gather in there are becoming something worth being part of. That's really what this is. Not a channel. A bunch of people quietly recovering the know-how that made our grandfathers impossible to push around, one forgotten trick at a time. If that's you, ride with us so the next one comes to you when it's ready. And the next one is a good one, because I found an account of how the old cattlemen preserved fresh meat for weeks in the heat of summer with no ice, no salt house, and one common plant they picked along the trail. And once you see it, you'll never look at your refrigerator the same way again. Stay close. I'll have it for you soon. Now, this video gave you the overview, but I held one thing back. That 1871 Chisholm Trail kitchen trick, step by step, so you can set it up yourself. It's waiting inside the frontier circle. In there you can ask me your own question, and a real person me answers you myself. And you won't be alone. Folks like you are already inside. Just point your phone's camera at the code on screen. Cancel any time. One click. If you enjoyed this, there's plenty more like it right here. Take a moment to subscribe and stay a while, because I have many more forgotten stories waiting just for you.